In SurfCam, wireframe geometry can reside in a variety of positions relative to the cut depth. Let's take a look at this example. The original geometry has a central post standing ½ an inch above the rib plane. There are 2-inch tall walls defining the ribs. The bottom area is ½ an inch thick, defining the depth of the holes. In each of these different setups, the geometry is in a different location relative to the depth position that needs to be cut. First, we have the geometry sitting at the actual position on top of the depth intended to be cut. Next, we have geometry sitting at the bottom of each depth intended to be cut. Third and fourth, we have geometry sitting at a single 2D plane with the depth to be cut several inches below. In each of these examples, an absolute z-value will define where the cut occurs. Each toolpath has the depth of cut correctly input in the amount to remove in Z field. The difference for each set is the geometry position definition. When the cut control parameter geometry is set to top, the geometry is positioned in the actual Z position in space. Then, the amount to remove is calculated below where that geometry resides. Essentially, this geometry defines the top edge of the cut. When the geometry parameter is set to bottom, the geometry is positioned in the actual Z position in space, and the amount to remove in Z is calculated above where that geometry resides. This geometry defines the floor of the cut. When geometry is set to top Z, the geometry can sit wherever you want it to in Z height, but must be positioned correctly relative to XY. It does not need to be at Z0. You then use the numeric field to the right of the geometry dropdown to set a Z position override that is an absolute Z parameter. Then, the amount to remove is applied below that absolute Z height in space. When geometry is set to bottom Z, the geometry can sit wherever you want it to in Z height, but must be correctly positioned relative to X and Y. It does not need to sit at Z0. You then use the numeric field to the right of the geometry dropdown to set a Z position override that is an absolute Z parameter. Then, the amount to remove is applied above that absolute Z parameter in space. This means there are multiple ways to define the XY cut boundaries for your toolpaths. You aren't just limited to defining the top edge of the cut.